Welcome, everyone, to the Player Prop Happy Hour Week 10 edition. I am your host, as always, Josh Larky, joined, as always, by my co-host, Ryan Reynolds with the Shades, and Ben Wolbransky with the Indoor Shades. Guys, it's great to be here. For anyone new to the show, each week we bring 3 player prop bets to the table. We go rapid fire discussing the bet we took, the sports book we found with the best odds, and why we decided ultimately to side with that bet specifically, what research or intuition, logic, stats, etc. led to it. Without further ado, Ryan, why don't you kick us off with your first prop bet of the day?
I'd like to start us off with a villainous type bet right out of the gate here, gentlemen. CJ Stroud under 255.5 passing yards at -115 on DraftKings. He's 4-4 against this number on the season, 1-3 over the last 4 games. Nico Collins is out. Lou Anarumo, Bengals defensive coordinator, is an opponent-specific game planner. Houston can't run the ball. They're entirely going to game plan for CJ Stroud. T. Higgins is out too on the Bengals side of things. So I think this game's actually a sneaky under where most people are going to bet on the over in this contest. This is a fade the public play. This is a contrarian play. You know, it's going to be scary because CJ Stroud, as we just saw, is a huge week-to-week ceiling with 470 passing yards on against the Bucs last week. But I'm going to take the under here.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference between something like prop betting and maybe DFS, where DFS, you get terrified of fading the big ceiling. Here in prop betting, we're trying to get the most likely result. We don't care as much about the ceiling outcome. CJ Stroud under 255.5. We like it. If you want more of Ryan's content, his betting preview will be on the site tomorrow, so you get to see what he's betting on in every single NFL game. Ben, your first bet of the day.
I'm going to take Austin Ekeler's longest reception over 14.5. You can get that at -105 on DraftKings. He's gone over that in all but one game this season. That one loss against Kansas City, they're allowing the second fewest yards per reception to the running back position. And this shouldn't come as a surprise, but Austin Ekeler, he leads all running backs in receptions of 15 yards, receptions of 15 or more yards per game. He's averaging 1 per game, and he's playing against the Lions, who are allowing an average of 1 reception per game of 15 or more yards to running backs. That number ranks 5th in the NFL, but the Lions are also giving up the 2nd most yards per reception to the running back position, only behind Chicago. They're running the 6th highest rate of cover 4, and Ekeler is averaging 15 yards per reception against cover 4, and that number ranks 3rd among the 48 running backs with at least 10 receptions this season.
I like it. I posted a bet yesterday in the free 33rd team Discord with Ekeler. That one's already moved in our favor, and I think this is the next one to take before this one also begins to move in our favor. Love the longest reception call here. If you want more of Ben's work, his projections are up on the33rdteam.com. They come out every Wednesday onto the site. So if you want to know not just his projections, but some of his thoughts behind them and a mix of the data, the intuition, then Ben is the right person. Very few people out there can do the data scientists, can play data scientists, but then also make it understandable for the public. Ben, certifiably able to do that. I think my first bet of the day, we're going to go with a Jets over. We're going to take Tyler Conklin, longest reception, over 13.5 yards. It's -115 on DraftKings. He's had at least 1 reception over this number in 6 of his past 7 games. He's had multiple games with receptions over this number, or games with multiple receptions over this number in that span as well. It's really simple. The Raiders have allowed a tight end reception of at least 14 yards in 8 of 9 games this year. It's not CJ Uzomah. It's not the other guy I'm blanking on who plays reps occasionally for them. It's literally Conklin. He is the receiving tight end for the Jets. So we're going over 13.5 yards, longest reception, -115 on DraftKings for Mr. Tyler Conklin, our warrior out there with the long hair. Ryan, your second bet of the day.
Derek Carr over 32.5 passing attempts, -115 on DraftKings. He's beat this in 6 of 9 games. 2 of those 3 games he went under were in the 3 games after his throwing shoulder injury, including the one that he actually missed the 4th quarter. The other game came against the Colts when Rashid Shaheed had 153 yards receiving on 3 receptions. Obviously, the attempts are going to be down in that kind of environment. Vikings are allowing 34 passing attempts per game this season. I think Carr hits this in the vast majority of scenarios.
I like that. We continue to bet on the underrated Derek Carr. And you should continue to read all of Ryan's work on the 33rdteam.com. His awards market analysis is up on the site. Make sure you're checking that out. There's literally nobody in the world that I would trust more for this type of content and this type of track record than Mr. Ryan Reynolds. You can also follow him on Twitter if you want to catch up with him and Blake Lively, see the fun dates they're going on. At Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter/X. Ben, your second bet of the day.
Give me Trey Palmer's longest reception over 13.5. Also minus 105 on DraftKings. Palmer's 4-4 on this line, but he's gone over in 3 of his last 4 as he's expanded his role in this offense. He's seen his route participation increase every single week for the last month, with the exception of last month where he had 85% route participation instead of 87 that he had the week prior, which is still good when you consider that he was running less than 50% of the routes over the first couple of weeks of the season. So now remember when I said that he's hit it in 3 of the last 4? Well, in that same time frame, he's averaging 14 yards per reception, which is more than the 13.5 yards required for this bet to cash. His average reception would cash this bet, and he's averaging 3 receptions per game over the past couple weeks. Last week, all 3 of Palmer's receptions were longer than this line. He had 3 receptions longer than 13.5 yards last week. And since the year 2000, there have been 5,512 games where a wide receiver had 3 or more receptions of 14 or more yards, and less than 20% of those players failed to record a catch longer than that the following week. So that would imply that this is an 80-20 play, which I think we know it's not. Data does not work this way. But given Palmer's role in the offense, how he has been expanding his role, given the history and given his recency, I will be taking this at minus 105 happily.
Ben, I like that. No one else blends the data, the logic like Ben. He is our data scientist for the 33rd Team's gambling department. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Wolby. He's got great threads throughout the week on his projections process, some of his prop bets. Make sure you're checking him out, and make sure that you, if you haven't already and you're living under a rock, time to wake up and sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Promo code 33rd. If you like best ball, they have playoff best ball tournaments. Those are some of my favorites of the year. And what's great right now is that the playoff picture is not set. So there's some really, really low rostered players out there that you can draft, like players on the Chargers or the Steelers or the Vikings, where people are pretty certain right now in these tournaments that none of these players will be in the playoffs. Spoiler alert, some of them will be. And this is kind of where you get your leverage, is actually doing these playoff best ball tournaments really early and just kind of setting your own playoff picture and going off of that. That's how I've made a lot of money doing these in the past. That's how most people generally do well in these, is that if you're playing at the last second, the ADPs have already adjusted. They've risen. We know who's in the playoffs. Right now is really the time to really pair up one juggernaut from the AFC or NFC with one sneaky contender from the other conference. This price point's $10. And if you sign up with promo code 33rd, 33RD, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you put in $50, you now have $100 in your account. That's 10 of those drafts. You put in $100, you now have $200. That's 20 of those drafts. I'm going to be ripping them throughout the weekend. I'd recommend that you do as well. More Underdog Fantasy. If you're like, I want more content, but I don't really want to do playoff best ball, fine. You can play the weekly battle royales. Our own analyst, Ryan Dooley, writes up the slate each week. Think DFS, but instead of salary, it's a snake draft. So you draft your players in a snake draft. It's 6 rounds. They take about 10 minutes. Those are super fun. He has strategy for that. And if you want to do the pick'em fantasy games, well, great. We have Daniel Raz, our analyst. He writes up his favorite weekly pick'em entries, and you can simply just follow along and take those same exact high-low plays that he's taking. My second bet of the day, speaking of what I'm taking, we're going to ride. I live in Denver, Broncos country, Russell Wilson. I think he's going over 210.5 passing yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. That's a low number. Over 210.5 passing yards. The Bills, who they're playing on Monday night, they've allowed their opponent to throw for at least 237 passing yards in 5 of the past 6 games. Ryan's talked about this a few times on our Monday and Thursday shows. The Bills' defense has struggled this year with injuries. The past 3 quarterbacks against Buffalo have all gone for at least 237 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. The Broncos are 7-point underdogs. They're going to have to pass in this contest. And a lot of people out there might be like, well, the Bills' run defense is pretty bad. Well, they started off really poorly, and they've kind of shifted. The past 4 games, the Bills have actually locked down running backs. No team's running backs have reached 4 yards per carry each of the past 4 games. And again, 210.5, reaching 211 passing yards is such an incredibly low number for a competent quarterback like Russell Wilson with a 16-4 touchdown interception ratio, playing some pretty decent football right now. 7-point road underdogs. We're riding Broncos country. Ryan, your third prop bet of the day and final prop bet of the day.
Tony Pollard over 69.5 rushing yards minus 110 on DraftKings. This is primarily a matchup-based play against the Giants. I said on Monday, I think it was, on Twitter, this is Tony Pollard week, putting my money where my mouth is. Giants are giving up the 5th most rushing yards to running backs per game this year. Pollard's beaten this number in 4 of his last 5 games against the Giants, 2 out of 3 against Wink Martindale's defense. He had 60 on the ground in that one loss against Martindale's defense. Josh Jacobs had 98 yards on heavy volume against the Giants last week. Dallas's passing attack has a much greater ceiling, which means less attention on the running back group than the Giants spent on the Raiders last week. If the Cowboys were 30-point favorites in this matchup against the Giants, and I had to pick every game, I would still take Dallas. I have no idea how the Giants are going to produce any kind of offense against this defense. So game script, I think, is a double-edged sword. I think Dallas blows out the Giants, but that might mean Pollard gets some reduced usage late in the game. That said, his rushing attempts over under 16.5. I'd be pretty excited if I got 16 carries in this matchup out of Pollard.
I like that one a lot. We talked earlier this week. We're not very bullish on Pollard rest of season, but this is definitely the Pollard week. And I think once Pollard hits this over and has a good fantasy game, we are going to be selling him in redraft. So keep in mind, folks, sometimes the fantasy points, they're enjoyable and they fleet quickly. And I think that's what we should be doing. A little grip it and flip it with Mr. Pollard. Again, that is Ryan Reynolds, NFL on Twitter. Ben, your third and final prop bet of the day.
Fantasy points are temporary, but winning prop bets, they live forever. Amari Cooper's longest reception over 20.5. That's minus 125 on DraftKings. He's 5-3 on this number this season, but he's 3-1 in full games with Deshaun Watson. And in that one loss, he had a reception that was exactly 20 yards, so it did not cash, but very close. He's seeing an average depth of target of 17 yards with Deshaun Watson. Compare that to 13 yards with PJ Walker. And the Ravens have been pretty good against passing plays, especially against the deep pass, but they've allowed 8 wide receivers to top this line through 8 games. And part of why they're so successful at stopping the pass over the top is because they're playing the 8th highest rate of cover 4. But Amari Cooper has a 27% team target share against cover 4 versus 23% regularly with Deshaun Watson. And he's averaging 25 yards per reception against cover 4. So well above this number. And I recognize that, that stat might be a little bit cherry picked. We're just talking about one coverage that he's probably going to see on a third, but this is typically where he excels. This is the coverage he's going to see the most of. And even still, he hit it in 75% of the games this year with his starting quarterback. So I will take that.
We will also take to Twitter to follow Ben Wolby at Ben Wolby. And if you want fantasy rankings and you're not just a prop bettor, I've got my fantasy rankings up on the 33rdteam.com every Tuesday. And then every Wednesday, we add in Ben's projections, Matthew Hill's rankings, and Kev Wheeler's rankings. And we average those ranks together so you can see exactly how we're all viewing each player. And then on Wednesdays, my rest of season rankings and trade calculator hit the site. Reminder to check out all of Ryan's work on the 33rd team, all of Ben's work on the 33rd team. For my final prop bet of the day, I'm going to go with Marquise Brown over 51.5 receiving yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. The past 8 games, he's averaging 9 targets, 99 air yards a game. Oh my God, we love this role. He's been under 50 receiving yards each of the past 4 games. So a lot of people might be like, I don't like this bet. It hasn't hit recently. Guys, that was with Josh Dobbs. Clayton Tune last week threw for 50 yards in that game. Now he gets Kyler Murray back. He still had at least 7 targets each of those past 4 games. As Ryan likes to say, this is a regression play. A receiver's topped this number against Atlanta each of the past 7 weeks. Marquise Brown is the clear number 1 here. A lot of people out there, they think Michael Wilson's pretty fun. You want to know what's not fun? Michael Wilson has never caught a pass in an NFL game from Kyler Murray. He is a rookie. Marquise Brown is the one that he has chemistry with. We are going to be riding with Marquise Brown 51.5 receiving yards. Folks, you just got 9-player prop bets in 15 minutes. From myself, Josh Larky. From our Associate Director of Fantasy and Betting, Ryan Reynolds. From our data scientist, Ben Wolby. From the 33rd team. From Underdog Fantasy, our sponsor promo code 33rd. Thank you, everyone,